it is significant and it is fragile. Look, this is a moment of profound relief for Israelis and Palestinians. This has been the longest and most brutal war between Israelis and Palestinians. And I think, at least in the initial stage, it will go ahead as predicted. In fact, President Trump has indicated he is going to fly to Israel and address the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, on Sunday. And the hostages should be released on Monday, and Palestinian prisoners as well. However, we have to see what will happen going forward, because there's a lot of other stages to Trump's 20-point peace plan. I would say overall, if I may, that this has been basically a victory for Israel and a defeat for Hamas and also for Iran. Potentially it is a victory in the longer term for the Palestinian people if they are in the future led by a government that is interested in their own well-being and wants to build up a Palestinian state rather than a kind of jihadi movement with lots of tunnels and weapons supplies and so on. This is a moment of optimism, and also in a wider sense in the Middle East. I think that, as Trump has indicated, he wants to push ahead with the rest of the Abraham Accords and secure a comprehensive peace deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia and a whole bunch of other Arab states that Israel doesn't have relations with.
We will get on to Donald Trump's role on that a bit later as well. But what exactly does Phase 1 include? Do we have any clarity on hostage release, Palestinian prisoner exchange, Israeli withdrawal commitments, or humanitarian arrangements? What are the fine details?
Yes, well, in brief, they are believed to be 20 living hostages. Just to remind people, almost exactly 2 years ago, October 7, 2023, 251 Israelis and also some other foreigners living in Israel, some Thais and Nepalese and Africans and so on, were kidnapped into Gaza. There believed to be 48 people left, of which 20 are living. Some of them we know are in horrendous health condition because we know this with the videos that Hamas and Islamic Jihad have put out. And according to the Trump plan, all those 20 living hostages must be released within 72 hours of the deal being signed. It will be signed today, so that's 3 days. On the Palestinian side, 250 convicted Palestinian terrorists, as Israel would call them, will be released, and about 1,700 other Palestinians, let's call them prisoners of war, those are people who have been taken into Israeli custody in the last 2 years during the course of the war, will also be released. Lots of people in Israel are very unhappy with the 250 Palestinians because they are convicted murderers and rapists among them. And this isn't in doubt because they have admitted or even boasted about the murders. And one friend in Israel said to me this morning, it's a bit ironic that Trump is celebrating a deal that releases murderers, whereas at the same time he's pursuing what he calls murderers from Venezuela and Honduras and so on being released into America. So, but anyway, that stage should go ahead. Israel to then withdraw to an agreed upon line within Gaza, but that is only representing about half of Gaza. And then Hamas are meant to disarm, and we will see whether they actually disarm and who they will hand those arms to. Will it be to a moderate Palestinian force, which has been training quietly in Egypt across the border from Gaza recently? And then will they be buffed up by international peacekeepers? We're hearing rumors they may come from Indonesia, maybe from the United Arab Emirates, maybe from Egypt, maybe some American supervision. But look, there are lots of questions ahead. But obviously right now, today, people are relieved and they are, optimistic.
Now, I know the news, the headlines coming out this morning have a lot of people happy and joyous. But let's look at those who might push back against this news. We know that Netanyahu's faced some cabinet opposition with this peace plan. Will that dissent now fade? And on the other side, do Israel really trust Hamas to follow through in the next stages, and vice versa?
So my own reading is this is all timed, and Netanyahu's government may indeed collapse because there are 5 parties in it, 2 of which are hard right parties. They may leave the government, but Israel is scheduled to have elections next year anyway. So even if the government collapses, in Netanyahu's calculation, he will hang on with a minority government until elections in a few months. So I think he realizes that by making some compromises, he may lose his hardline coalition partners. On the Palestinian side, look, I think Hamas are losers here. And it's a question of whether the Palestinian Authority, that is internationally recognized and runs rules from Ramallah in the West Bank, will try to assert itself back in Gaza, or whether there'll be this kind of, undefined peace, government of technocrats overseen by former British Prime Minister Tony Blair and others in a transitional phase, and whether Hamas have any role to play in future, which they might do if they become a regular political party and give up what they would call armed struggle and join, the norm of Palestinian politics rather than put all their efforts into, what they might call jihad or resistance or whatever they want to call it.
Now, just to circle back to where we started, Donald Trump's taken a large degree of responsibility. We saw in some of A News' earlier videos there that it's attributed, many of those in Israel attribute him particularly as the one who made this happen. Do you think it could have been reached without him? Do you think it could have happened so soon? Is his pressure on Netanyahu significant?
I think it is significant, but Trump loves to take a victory lap. People are very afraid to contradict Trump because he can be quite brutal. But look, I think that although international media tend to interview opponents of Netanyahu in Israel, many other Israelis are thankful to Netanyahu. He takes a lot of, criticism throughout the world and also in Israel. But militarily, he's kind of been proved correct. I don't think Hamas would have agreed to this agreement today if Netanyahu hadn't defied his own generals and gone into Gaza City in the last weeks and also kind of done what I might call a warning shot in Qatar against Hamas there. These are the key things that made Hamas realize that probably the game is up. And, I'm not sure that we ever would have got to this point with Hamas if Netanyahu hadn't taken on Hezbollah, hadn't taken on the Iranian regime who helped supply and back Hamas.
Just to pick up on something you said there, if I may, do you not think the pressure from the international media, the world leaders, has also contributed immensely to ending the war in Gaza?
No, because I think that from an Israeli point of view and from Netanyahu's point of view, this has been viewed as a kind of existential war, not just because of Hamas, but because of Iran. And even yesterday, there were rockets from Yemen, from the Houthis, from Gaza. I think Israel is a victory militarily. I think Israel is a victor in the sense that a lot of Arab states may sign an agreement, but Israel is a loser when it comes to its international reputation, which has really been battered, not just in the media, in street protests, in various allied governments in Europe being very critical, the international court charging Netanyahu with war crimes. So it's not a victory in that sense. But I think that military pressure is what counted in the end, as it does with most wars. And I think Israel, from a military point of view, has fought this war very decisively. And I think that one has to hand it to Netanyahu, just like,
But it did take 2 years. It did take 2 years. That's a long time to get here.
It did, but, it took 18 months for the Americans and the British to defeat ISIS in Mosul. Mosul, the second city of Iraq, has a population of
I'm keen not to go off on too many tangents. I do apologise.
It did take 2 years.
If I may, because I do want to stay on focus. Let's think practically. Will aid now be able to flow into Gaza? Will Israel still come under heavy global condemnation? And how long is this process going to get to where we need to get to for this to really be a ceasefire? And it's not going to go back to normal per se, but for some normalization to come into effect.
I hope that the ceasefire will go into effect today and no one else is going to die on either side and there are not going to be any bullets exchanged. Having said that, there may be rogue elements within Gaza from other groups like Islamic Jihad, so we don't know there'll be nothing. As far as aid, I think, of course, there will be an increase in aid, because one of the problems is it's difficult to distribute aid for aid workers if there's live fire going on. It's easier to, get aid in if their lives aren't at risk. And I think, there is actually parts of Gaza where there's plenty of aid, but there are other parts of Gaza that need more aid, and certainly we need peace and quiet, so hospitals and doctors can operate without worrying about, air attack by Israel. As far as rebuilding, I think it can happen quite quickly. Look, Gaza's population is about 2 million, which is not that much when it comes to the amount of money that governments like Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and so on. I did the calculation. Qatar hosted the World Cup a couple of years ago. It would cost less money than they paid building World Cup facilities to rebuild Gaza to a very high, nice standard. So
Tom, I do apologise. But we are running out of time. I just want to get one quick line out of you. How important is this regional security? We've had mediators from Qatar, Egypt. Is this a new dynamic emerging? I just want this as succinctly as possible, if you could.
Yes, I think it's very important. We have both countries that are pro-Western and countries which are less pro-Western, or certainly less pro-Israel involved. I think Trump may be right in that we may be coming to a point where the whole Middle East can pretty much get along, with the exception of the Iranian regime, I should point out. But we have to wait and see what will happen with the Palestinians and whether there will be a path to Palestinian statehood. That is a big question still going ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. Your insights greatly appreciated, and we hope you have get on soon. Thank you very much.